I'd like to call the Senate Committee on Energy and Technology to order. Will the clerk please call the roll to establish quorum?
Chairman Knopf.
Here.
Senator Prose. Senator Horn. Here, Senator Shoemaker. Here. Senator Hune. Here. Senator Shirkey. Senator Zorn. Here. Senator Hopgood. Senator Kniezek. Here. Senator Conyers. Here. Mr. Chairman, you have 8 members present. There is a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'd like a motion to adopt the minutes from the October 5th, 2017 committee meeting. So moved by Senator Horn. Any objections? Seeing none, without objection, the minutes are adopted. Also need a motion to excuse absent members. Again, moved by Senator Horn. Any objections? Seeing none, the excused member or the absent members are excused. Today we're going to, first of all, welcome everyone to Energy and Technology and the Senate. I'm so glad so many of you could come. We love filling up our room and listen to all of you, and that's our opportunity, your opportunity today to do that. So we are first going to take up Senate Bill 637, which deals with a major emerging issue in the telecommunications industry. It's called small cells and the rollout of the 5th generation wireless communication technology. And if we don't get through to everyone that wants to testify today, because we have quite a few cards up here, there will be an opportunity at another later date to be able to come back and do that if we don't get to everybody. We'll try to get to as many of you as we can with the time that we have allotted. So again, appreciate all of you coming, taking time out of your busy schedules to give us some input on this first Senate Bill 637. So to start off the process, I'd like to call our Senator, Senator Joe Hune. And Joe's going to go out front and tell us a little bit about your bill. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, colleagues on the Energy and Tech Committee. I got to do a little bit of sucking up to begin with, Mr. Chairman, and I have never worked an issue through your committee that you chaired. Thank you for your methodical and steady hand in this process.
You almost blew it. You almost blew it.
Your steady hand is much different than my heavy hand. Is that better? So I appreciate this. The time that you've taken me under your wing on this issue has been appreciated. I appreciate it, my friend and chairman. So to go into the issue, I have a script here, and I wanted to go through this. And as technologies have advanced over the years, our flip phone past needs to keep up with the technologies of the future. And I'm glad I'm not in front of Senator Brandenburg's committee because he loves his flip phone. But as 5G, which is an industry term for the 5th generation of mobile connectivity, as 5G evolves, certain components need to be in place in order to ensure connectivity remains fast and reliable. And what 5G is, and I'll put it as simple as possible in terms that I understand, 5G is the 5th generation, and it has the capability of speeds of up to 10 gigabytes per second. And what that amounts to is a full high-def movie can literally be downloaded in just a couple of seconds. And also it reduces latency, which is the delay before a transfer of data actually occurs. So it's the next technology that we will all be probably dependent on in the time to come. So Senate Bill 637 will use a statewide approach to streamline small cell legislation with the use of rights of way, as well as laying the groundwork for Michigan's future wireless needs, whether it be the 5G capabilities, wireless for smart cities, or even for autonomous vehicle technology. So as the capabilities and proliferation of mobile devices have increased, so obviously has the demand for wireless networks. And in response, the industry has developed small cells, and I have a sample of one with me. Small cells are simply just what the name implies. They are small wireless antennas with a much smaller footprint than today's big towers and poles that can be deployed quickly and cost effectively on existing infrastructure, on existing poles, on existing lines, what have you. So the new poles or modifications to the poles in the rights-of-way would be limited under the bill to the greater of either 10 feet in height above the existing pole on the effective date in the bill, or also within 500 feet of the new pole or modified pole in the same right-of-way or 50 feet above the ground. It also goes further to define small cell facilities, which is the additional infrastructure that would be needed to help connect these amongst each other. And they could not be more than 10 feet above an existing pole or wireless support structure in that right-of-way on the effective date as well. So please keep in mind that these new small cells could be as inconspicuous as this. And some of them will be placed on top of the pole or attached to the pole or what have you. Small cell facilities, again, are the additional infrastructure, and they would be limited as well. And they could, again, not be above 10 feet above the existing pole. The deployment of small cells ensures that the ever-growing number of wireless consumers will have the reliable, on-demand coverage that they need when utilizing their functions on their mobile devices and other technologies that are going to be coming in the future. And the goal of this bill is to create a regulatory environment that's conducive and efficient to roll out this small cell technology across the state. So with this small cell expansion, our citizens will benefit from both higher quality wireless service and increased investment in our state by the wireless technology companies. In our current law, wireless providers do not have direct access to those rights-of-way. So this bill defines small cell technology again and creates a consistent regulatory structure by which wireless providers may seek the access to the authority for these poles to attach to the poles in existing infrastructure. It also limits the fees for the location or co-location of small cell wireless facilities that are in the right-of-way. It also requires that the pole attachment fees are consistent, I repeat, are consistent for all pole attaching technologies. So the fees are capped at $100 for each small cell wireless facility, and up to 5 facilities beyond that are charged at $50 for each. The local units of government or others are allowed to charge less than that amount as well. That is the cap, that's the ceiling, etc. There's also a cap on the total annual rate that an authority may collect, which cannot exceed the lesser of the actual, direct, and reasonable costs related to applications for the zoning permits for the co-location on an authority pole. Or $20 per year is what is max allowed in terms of charge fee for that. And the locals may charge less as well. So the question can be asked, and I'm sure it will be asked, why should we cap the fees? Well, there's anecdotal information of some communities across the country. Buffalo, New York, you can point to, that was charging $2,000 per attachment of one of these. In a more densely populated area, they may require one of these on each corner, attached to an existing infrastructure, building, pole, what have you. So they were charging $2,000 for each one of these, and in some municipalities that may be hundreds, if not thousands of those would be required. Long Beach, California was charging $1,500 per attachment as well. So this bill also would limit zoning control for small cell placement. And this freedom from the zoning code does not necessarily exempt wireless companies from accountability for public safety concerns. That's important to be mentioned as well. And one last anecdotal comment. I was talking with some of the wireless companies, and I said, what's the need for this? Well, many other states in our Great Lakes region have already adopted something similar. And the response was that their investments, they look at a national map, the map of our country, and they will put investments in the states, in the areas that provide the least resistance to putting up this infrastructure. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to say thank you. I know there may be some technical questions I probably may not be able to answer, but again, it's been a pleasure, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any questions for the senator? Senator Horn.
Not so much a question, Mr. Chairman, but just a comment. I've seen you testify twice already today, and I just want to let you know this is one of the most riveting testimonies I've ever witnessed. So I appreciate your being there.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Senator. Appreciate it very much. Next, we're going to have Lisa Mccabe, Director of the State Legislative Affairs for the Wireless Communication Industry Association, to speak on the bill. Welcome, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I'm with CTIA, which is the Trade Association for the Wireless Communications Association. Michigan consumers and consumers throughout the U.S. continue to increasingly demand access to wireless services. In fact, nationwide wireless data traffic has grown over 2,300% since 2010. So there's huge growth in data. In Michigan, there are over 10 million wireless connections, more connections than residents, and 69% of broadband connections are mobile in Michigan. These demands from wireless consumers require that networks be updated today through the deployment of small cell technology. Senate Bill 637 provides a streamlined process for the efficient deployment of this technology. Small cells will also be essential to next generation 5G, as you've heard from Senator Hune. Small cells with 5G will connect 100 times more devices than we have on the networks today, and the networks will be up to 100 times faster than today. 5G will also bring economic growth. Economic development will come through this new network of faster speeds, and different innovation will come from that. It's important to note, however, 5G cannot be delivered without the wireless infrastructure in place. Small cell infrastructure is key to autonomous vehicles and the future of transportation. Capital expenditures require regulatory certainty, and this legislation provides that pathway. The bill will help Michigan avoid issues that were mentioned, issues that will inhibit next generation rollout and deployment. Here in Michigan, current regulations address traditional towers and don't address small cells. Therefore, approvals can take long, sometimes up to 2 years, and can be very costly. It's important to note that Senate Bill 637 places no limitations on localities' abilities to deny permits based on building, safety, or electrical codes or standards. Senate Bill 637 establishes the regulatory certainty for showing that Michigan is ready for investment. Thank you.
Senator Horn?
I do have a question this time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And maybe you're the person to answer this question. This is more street level, consumer related. In some of our stadiums, professional college stadiums where you have lots of people, 50,000, 100,000 people show up, and I end up with 4 bars on my phone. It seems like I have plenty of reception, but I can't get anything through. How will this affect that congestion problem? And is that already happening in places around Michigan?
I don't specifically know exactly what's happened in Michigan, but yes, small cells are specifically to reach areas of congestion. They're being deployed today to really get at those areas of congestion to make sure that consumers can have the expected speeds and ability that they want.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Prose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. I'm curious, at what pace did we eclipse the 3 and 4G phase of consumer need, consumer interest, consumer demand that it have that kind of speed and so forth? I have my own interest in this, obviously, because we've become dependent upon our cell phones and so forth. These devices are constant communication, literally as my daughter is now texting me right now to explain what she forgot in her homework today. I can do very little 132 miles away, but I can certainly learn about it right now as we speak, live and in person. I'm curious, at what pace does the industry intend or expect that even the efforts we make on 5G are already starting to think about what does the next generation look like and when?
Well, I think it's hard to know. The future, it's hard to predict exactly what's happened in the future. I mean, there's still a lot of bandwidth left in 4G LTE, and small cells will help make that network more dense to provide coverage in the instance that Senator Horn mentioned. So there is stuff today, and we don't really know exactly what the future is going to hold, but we know by deploying this today, we can help our problems today and also work toward whatever great, cool, interesting stuff will come in the future.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Next, I'd like to invite Michelle Robinson, Vice President of the State Governmental Affairs for Verizon Wireless. Come forward and welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, my name is Michelle Robinson, and I am Verizon's Vice President of State Government Affairs. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon to testify in support of Senate Bill 637. I am here in partnership with my colleagues in the wireless industry to discuss the importance of a statewide policy for the deployment of mobile broadband infrastructure in the state of Michigan. Ms. Mccabe from CTIA has talked about the accelerating demand for mobile broadband, the use of data on that mobile device, which is staggering. On balance, today, the nation's wireless companies are managing the growth for now. Still, in some geographic areas, as the demand for data has grown, it has begun to create congestion on our networks. And when our networks are congested, our customers, your constituents, start experiencing difficulty. Some of you have experienced this yourself. Senator Horn, I think you were just asking about this. You have, for example, been to a major sporting event where lots of people are gathered and most are using mobile devices and found it difficult to request your Uber driver or your Lyft driver, found it difficult to pull your Facebook feed. These experiences are annoying to any consumer, but it becomes a different matter entirely when you consider that all levels of law enforcement rely on those same networks to communicate in critical situations. Think about some of last year's most harrowing moments in San Bernardino, California, Dallas, Texas, Orlando, the recent storms in Florida and the flooding in Houston. In these instances, lots of people, law enforcement, local and national media, emergency medical professionals, and everyday people who just want to help quickly gather in one location, and they're using mobile data on their devices. Senators, your expectation is and should continue to be that when safety matters most and coordination makes a difference, mobile networks are there and can handle it. Think, too, about this state's very own economic development goals, especially in cities and towns. Access to reliable, technologically advanced communication systems and data networks are a critical component toward establishing an attractive business environment and continuing Michigan's comeback story. Think about, for a second, new smart city innovations. Most governments, in particular local governments, have a vision about leveraging smart city innovations to improve services for citizens at lower costs, whether it's traffic management, smart lighting, autonomous vehicles, smart parking, Wi-Fi kiosks, you name it, these innovations will simply use more mobile data. Unless our industry can leap ahead of the growing demand for data, local governments' dreams of a connected city will be anemic at best. The solution is building the next generation of wireless communications using small cell technology. Our industry has been hard at work across the state of Michigan in the past several years to obtain local government approvals to place small cells on vertical structures within public rights-of-way. And while the wireless industry has placed a number of small cells in the state, the permitting process is slow and unpredictable, even when it comes to attaching a small cell antenna on an existing structure that's already in the right-of-way. Senators, the current process is in need of streamlining if Michigan is to meet the current and future demands for mobile data and wireless communication, demand that, if not met, threatens to hold back the economic agenda. Now is the time to create a predictable statewide framework that is designed to streamline the process for small cell deployment, inclusive of rates and fees that will amount to an invitation to the kind of capital investment this industry stands ready to make. Already, roughly 13 states have recognized the need for a streamlined process of the sort I'm describing, and I expect more states will do the same yet this year and next year. And those states that adopt policies aimed at inviting investment in small cell technology have positioned consumers in those states, government at all levels, law enforcement, job providers, individuals to be among the first in the nation to experience the benefits. Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude by just saying that the wireless companies represented in this room today invest staggering amounts of capital every year in the state of Michigan in communications networks. For my company in the state of Michigan, that figure was more than $500 million just last year. Nationally, according to the Progressive Policy Institute's annual report of Investment Heroes, Verizon and AT&T each invested more capital in America than each ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, and Alphabet. That's Google. And here we are today, the entire wireless sector, proudly announcing our desire to invest even more in Michigan and to do it quickly in order to stay ahead of the demand for mobile data. And the work and investment our industry makes now to get ahead of the demand for mobile data is focused on adding that capacity for 4G networks, as is already discussed, but we will simultaneously be paving the path to the next generation network, that is 5G. And if history is any predictor, we know that mobile networks and 5G will usher in the next wave of innovation and economic advancement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I am available to answer any questions you or the committee may have.
Thank you. Senator Conyers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I'm thinking, and perhaps it's a bit of a tech question, is in terms of redundancy in the co-location. Could you explain, in the event of one of those natural disasters, would the small cell technology, how would it co-locate? Would it roll over to the other locations? I'm thinking of that in terms to the current infrastructure we have right now and how hard it would be to take down one of the larger towers.
Yeah. So I can only speak on my company's behalf, and when it comes to redundancy, we take it quite seriously. So every single one of those small cells will require a fiber connectivity as well. And when we think about redundancy, we use a term in the industry called backhaul, right? So how do you sort of connect all this up? And in the event of natural disasters or man-made disasters, that redundancy is key. And so that will continue to be there. And as we deploy more small cell equipment, there will be more of it. So redundancy will continue, Senator.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Senator Shirkey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michelle, compare what we're being asked to contemplate today to other states that you believe are the most competitive and most attractive to investment.
Senator, I think the bill you have before you today is extremely competitive as compared to some of the other states that have passed legislation. It is a very good bill in my view.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to respond to a question Senator Prowse asked the prior witness.
Go ahead.
So you asked a question about what is this going to bring? And Ms. Mccabe is exactly right. It's hard to predict the future, but here's what we do know. Every time we stood at the precipice like we are today and we ready ourselves to invest in that next wave of communications infrastructure, we completely underestimate the economic transformation that this will bring. So when you think, for example, one small example, moving from 2G to 3G, we're very creative in our industry, 2G, 3G, 4G, but moving from 2G to 3G, we knew as an industry that texting would be something that consumers would probably like and want to purchase. And we were all probably a little bit shocked by how our teenagers transformed from talkers to texters. But we completely did not see that that technology would allow people in developing countries who previously were unbankable become bankable and change the economic lives of families. Take for a second the move from 3G to 4G and now 4G LTE. We built it because we knew there was a consumer demand for it. Law enforcement and, Federal Department of Defense is telling us. But what we didn't know is that we would completely transform the way you and I get from point A to point B. But for 4G LTE, we would not have Lyft and Uber in the robust way that we have it, right? So what we do know as we pave this path to 5G, we know that today we are completely going to underestimate the economic value of that transformation. I hope that helps, Senator.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite up Craig Bohr, President and CEO of Mccabe, which is Michigan Electric Co-op Association, and Mark Kapler, President and CEO of Homeworks, Tri-County Electric Co-op. Near the Lansing area, just outside the Lansing area. Portland, yep. My district, there you go. Welcome. Welcome to my committee. Your committee.
Thank you, Senator. Oops. Thank you. Is that better? Sorry about that. Thank you, Senator Knopf. As the chairman indicated, my name is Craig Bohr. I'm President and CEO of the Michigan Electric Cooperative Association. We're the trade association for Michigan's electric cooperatives. We have a footprint that encompasses 59 of Michigan's counties, and as our name implies, certainly we're in the rural areas of the state where telecommunications options are sparse if available at all. And we do have some concerns we'd like to share with you briefly on the legislation. I think, as many of you know, the majority of the areas we serve are either underserved or not served at all when it comes to telecommunications. And I think that's a concern of us as we go forward in terms of bringing the same type of benefits to rural areas that many of us enjoy in more urban areas like Lansing and others. I think, for the record, we support the small cell wireless technology and what's trying to be accomplished here. We very much are encouraged by what we've heard from the others here today and some of the provisions and the technology that are included in Senate Bill 637. However, we do have some concerns as it pertains to electric cooperatives and some of the references to us in the package. And let me give you a couple examples, a little background on that. We currently have in excess of 100,000 pole attachments in place throughout rural Michigan. We have enabled all types of telecommunications providers. We have those in place with over 100 different providers throughout our 59 county footprint. And I think it's fair to say we've been really collaborative in terms of how we've worked with those telecom providers. I think our track record is good, and I think our goal here is to help enable technology, whether it be the technology of small cell or others. We certainly don't want to stand in the way of that, and I think our track record sort of represents the fact that we want these types of technologies to succeed, particularly in less urban areas. However, I believe it is important to share with you some of the lessons we've learned from our colleagues in other states. We've reached out to our co-op colleagues in 47 other states where legislation of this type has been either moved or discussed in many of those. But I think, as we heard today, a couple of points for you to remember or to point out. Small cell technology really works hand in hand with strengthening current 4G networks as well as preparing for 5G networks. I think it's really important to point out that is not rural Michigan, as many of you know all too well when you travel through some of the areas we serve. Many of those very areas we have no cell service whatsoever or spotty at best. So I think clearly the technology is aimed at the legislation as well, urban areas or suburban areas, certainly not rural areas. Just as importantly, as we heard from the young lady from Verizon, fiber connection is needed to employ the services of 5G. I think, as many of you know all too well, we do not have fiber in very many areas of rural Michigan, be it for Mr. Hanson, Midwest Energy, and Mr. Kapler, and a few other electric co-ops that are going forward. So again, the focus is really on urban and suburban areas, and we get that. But I think it's important to understand that it is really focused at that. And the references in the bill to rural electric cooperatives and some of the issues related to pole attachment and other things cause us some real concern here. The bottom line is we support the technology. We'd like to see it go forward as robustly as we can, recognizing that is likely going to only happen, at least for the immediate future, in more rural and suburban areas because of the technology and the fiber attachment being critical to 5G networks. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Mr. Mark Kapler from Homeworks Tri-County Electric Cooperative. He'll talk to you just briefly about some of the real sort of safety concerns we have with some of the things that are contemplated in Senate Bill 637.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you to Chairman Knopf and the committee for hearing us today. Again, my name is Mark Kapler. I'm the general manager at Homeworks Tri-County Electric Cooperative. We are a electric distribution utility that serves 13 counties from Clare County down to Jackson County, and we serve a total of 22,000 members. We member consumers. We call them members because they are the owners of our cooperative. And as Craig said, I'm here to just address a few what we call practical concerns with the small wireless technology, and they really fall into 4 categories: safety, electric reliability, private property rights, and some of the liability protections for our members when someone else is working on our poles. I have to start out by saying, no, we don't clearly understand what is being proposed at this time as far as the technology. We have not been approached by any of the communication incumbents here with a proposal to attach to our poles. So we have not seen the actual technology that is being planned to be deployed into the area. What we have is we have worked with a couple of our members have worked with some wireless companies, and they have deployed a couple different types of technologies that we have some familiarity with, which we'll discuss here quickly. And we have attached to our testimony a representative example of what small cell technology looks like. And one of our sister cooperatives, Great Lakes, has some small cell technology. In this photo here on the left shows where that's located on their poles and how it's being deployed for them. Just a few things about this photo and a few things that you should know about the electric system. The top part of the pole is dedicated to the electric distribution, and then the National Electric Safety Code allows for a communication areas that has to be a minimum of 40 inches below the last electrical line on there. In this case, you can see there the lowest electrical line is a neutral, and so the wireless device that's shown down here is well below the 40-inch minimum. The other thing I would point out to you, it is very crowded at the top of this pole with electric lines. And you may or may not know, but those lines are not insulated. The vast majority of the electrical transmission and distribution lines that are in our state are not insulated. It's usually just the lines that run from, say, a transformer, like that line that's coming down to the right, down to the home. That is an insulated line. Everything else is uninsulated, so very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing up and around those the wires. Now, in our industry, a line worker has to have a minimum of 3,000 hours of on-the-job training and then be approved by their supervisor before they can work in an energized space like that. And so very, very big concern for us if there's going to be devices that are mounted at the top of the pole that is being done by a qualified individual. The last thing we want to have happen is have someone get hurt on our electric system. So as Craig mentioned today, we do have many attachees to our pole. They're down in that communication area. At our particular cooperative, we work with 16 different telecom companies that have attached to our poles. We have on our roughly 60,000 poles, we have about 13,000 attachments. So we have some experience with that, and we think we work very well with those folks that need to, deploy whatever technology they are deploying out there. Reliability is also another issue that I wanted to address with you. And our poles, our system is designed based on the National Electric Safety Code as well as the Rural Utility Service, federal part of the federal government. They provide us with the construction designs that we use in our poles, and so those poles are designed to provide electricity. But when you start putting other devices on the poles, those have to be considered. There has to be an engineering study done to make sure they don't damage or weaken the poles from a reliability standpoint. And as you can imagine, things like wind and ice can add a lot of stress to these types of devices, these types of construction, and something that has to be considered. And again, we have not been approached by anybody to know exactly what is being suggested here and what those requirements are. It may require stronger poles or stronger system than we have out there today. And one other issue to consider is the right-of-way. The vast majority of our power lines are in private, not public, right-of-ways, meaning that the cooperatives have went out and got easements from each of our members to have our lines on their private property. And we do not have the right in those easements to convey those property rights to another party. So the other attachees that we have on our poles today, as part of our standard agreement, are required to get with the property owner to get their own easement to be on their property. So that's an issue that definitely needs to be considered by those that are planning to utilize it. And lastly, we are still working to understand what the proposed language means on the pole attachment fees and how it impacts the roughly 100,000 pole attachments that our cooperatives already have on our lines today. It's a little unclear to us what is being suggested there. So we also need to have some discussion on that. As Craig said, we do want our rural neighbors to have access to these communication services. We feel it is economically critical to the rural area, which continues to lose population across the country. And but we also think that these questions of safety and reliability and property rights all need to be addressed. So with that, thank you, Chairman Knopf and the committee for your work on this bill and for considering our thoughts on this important legislation. And we can take, I guess, any questions that there might be.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Senator Horn?
Just to ask you too, I mean, you know, I've got a special affinity for, you know, electric co-op, you know, companies and your customers that own your co-ops. But I'm a little confused by the, you know, I guess the testimony. You know, you show us this picture here of something that already exists in a rural co-op area, but you're worried about safety. You work well with some 16 telecom companies that know how to do that. You've got the relationship to talk to them about putting that up safely. Obviously, you're not worried about reliability and weather on this particular pole, so you must have some conversation with them on this one here. I know the telecom companies probably have lawyers that are dealing with property rights issues all the time and right-of-way issues, so that probably is going to kind of take care of itself. The one thing where we probably agree on is your fourth category of understanding the language and the fees that are part of that. How do you juxtapose your concerns with the great relationship and all the work that's already being done? I mean, is there something very specific about this technology or this piece of equipment that creates a safety concern other than what you've already experienced?
Senator Horn, I think the concern is really twofold. One is not understanding the technology and the size of that technology and what's going to be in the communication space. And then secondly, the reference that's implied with this technology in terms of an antenna in an energized space. Much of the literature and whatnot that we've seen on these installations have involved an antenna in that energized space at the top of the pole. That concerns us greatly, because that's where that whole issue of safety comes in terms of who's working in that energized space. Again, we're not trying to stand in the way of technology, and we strongly believe that it's something that we're not going to see in rural areas for a long, long period of time. I think our concerns with the specific legislation is it really brings us in, just like it does a municipality or someone in a more urban or suburban area where this technology is real and deployable.
legislation suggests that there is a pull-top device, and it also suggests that there is a device, and not saying specifically where it's located, that is up to 28 cubic feet in size. So I don't know how much that weighs, but that could pose some reliability concerns with a pole. Plus, I didn't mention this, but not all our poles are accessible by bucket trucks. And so we have linemen that still climb poles. So when you start putting devices, even like this one here, and they have to get to the top of the pole to work, they got to find a way to get around that device to get up to the top if it's in an area that's not accessible by a bucket truck. So.
Anyone else? No? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Before we go on to our next person that wants to testify, I'm going to have the clerk read in to the record those who oppose and those who support but do not wish to speak. So if the clerk would put them into the record, I'd appreciate it.
We have Jim Weeks, Michigan Municipal Electrical Association, does not wish to speak and opposes the bill. Matt Groen, Michigan Cable Telecommunications Association, does not wish to speak and is neutral on the bill. Bob Stewart of Frontier Communication does not wish to speak and does support the bill. AT&T does not wish to speak and supports the bill. John Jones from Sprint does not wish to speak and supports the bill. Frank Acuity from T-Mobile does not wish to speak and supports the bill. Paul Boyan from MDOT does not wish to speak and is neutral on the bill. Hunter Napper does not wish to speak and is opposed to the bill. Mike Wartz from PROTEC does not wish to speak and opposes the bill. Amy Gumbrake from Wayne County does not wish to speak and opposes the bill. And Lola Killey does not wish to speak and opposes the bill.
Okay, thank you. Next we have, is it Haran Rashes? Sir? From Extenet Systems Incorporated? Out of Leslie, Illinois? What's that? Lyle. Oh, I'm sorry. Out of Lyle, Illinois. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the Michigan Senate.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman,
Good afternoon.
senators, staff members, and interested parties. As the chairman said, my name is Haran Rashes. I'm Director of External Relations for Extenet Systems, Inc., a privately held company based in Lyle, Illinois. Extenet has a vital interest in SB 637 because we design, build, own, manage, and operate indoor and outdoor distributed network systems to help meet the growing demand for improved mobile and wireless broadband coverage and capacity in key strategic markets across the United States, including many such markets here in Michigan. Distributed network systems bring wireless network elements such as low-powered wireless antennas and access points closer to the user to ensure ubiquitous and high-capacity wireless broadband connectivity. Utilizing distributed antenna systems, remote radio heads, small cells, Wi-Fi, and distributed core software technologies, Extenet enables wireless service providers, enterprises, and venues to better serve their subscribers, customers, workers, residents, tenants, and communities. Extenet owns and operates multi-carrier, often referred to as neutral host, and multi-technology distributed network systems to ensure multiple wireless service providers can provide their 3G, 4G LTE, and eventually 5G services in the most efficient and effective manner. Extenet creates a scalable network design utilizing its high bandwidth fiber network to ensure the network densification needs of the wireless service providers are met and can evolve over time as user demand dictates. Typically, Extenet installs distributed network systems on existing utility poles, street lights, and other existing poles located in the public right-of-way. Access to these public right-of-ways for such distributed network systems are essential not only to Extenet, but also to the residents of the state of Michigan who are clamoring for more and more wireless access and bandwidth, which they can only get from the natural increase in the number of installations, such as Extenet's. In Michigan, Extenet is registered as a competitive access provider, or CAP, on the MPSC's Intrastate Telecommunications Service Provider Registration Database and has had a CAP tariff on file with the MPSC since July 26, 2007. We have pole attachment agreements in place in Michigan with DTE Energy, Consumers Energy, AT&T, Frontier, and Indiana Michigan Power. These agreements permit the placement of fiber, antenna, and wireless equipment on utility-owned poles within the public right-of-way. And we have almost 30 Metro Act permits with Michigan municipalities and networks in place throughout the state. For many years prior to joining Extenet, I practiced telecommunications law here in Lansing. In that capacity, I saw Michigan take the national lead in helping telecommunications carriers gain access to the public rights-of-way through the introduction and passage of the Metropolitan Extension Telecommunications Right-of-Way Oversight Act, PA 48 of 2002. The Metro Act, as it is called, originated in this House as SB 880 and helped standardize access to and disputes over the public right-of-way. However, despite a 2004 determination by the Michigan Metro Authority that distributed network systems should be granted access to the rights-of-way under the Metro Act, we continue to encounter municipalities that do not allow access or seek non-economically feasible fees for such access. SB 637 would, as the Metro Act did, standardize access to and fees for placing wireless telecommunications facilities within the public right-of-way. It would assure federally guaranteed access for small cell and distributed antenna systems to the public rights-of-way are maintained in Michigan, and in turn, this would result in the timely deployment of next-generation 5G telecommunications and other telecommunications infrastructures vital to Michigan's economic welfare. SB 637 establishes rates for attachment to municipally owned utility poles and structures that would be economically feasible and standardized throughout Michigan. In addition, SB 637 would encourage timely approval of small cell locations and installations, resulting in rapid deployment based on economics and consumer demand. While Extenet supports the passage of 637, we also recognize that it is not a perfect bill nor a perfect solution. We urge this committee to work with all parties to reach a consensus to improve SB 637 prior to passage. Extenet suggests that this committee look at the following areas of SB 637 for improvement. SB 637 currently caps the annual rates that a municipality can charge for access to the public rights-of-way at $20 per utility pole per year. While Extenet agrees that such rates must not exceed the municipality's direct and actual costs of managing the rights-of-way and must be competitively neutral with regard to other uses of the rights-of-way, Extenet believes that the rate proposed in SB 637 is actually below the direct and actual cost of managing the public rights-of-way and should be re-examined. SB 637 also caps the rates that an authority can charge for access to its own poles at $20, in other words, street lights that are owned by a city, but references the formula that has been established by the Federal Communications Commission in its rules adopted pursuant to Section 224E of the Communications Act of 1934 as amended by the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Extenet recommends allowing the FCC formula to set such rates, as that formula is adjusted for inflation and other factors over time. SB 637 permits the installation of so-called micro-wireless facilities that are suspended on cables that are strung between utility poles or wireless support structures, all without permits, fees, or applications. We do not understand the rationale for treating such facilities differently and more favorably from small cell wireless facilities as defined in SB 637. Both occupy space in the right-of-way, and they should be treated equally. Additionally, Extenet believes that the scope of SB 637 should be limited to activities within the public rights-of-way. In Section 15 of SB 637, Extenet encourages this committee to consider mirroring the dispute resolution section, Section 7 of the Metro Act, MCL 484-3107. Such a change would send disputes to the Michigan Public Service Commission on an expedited basis as opposed to the circuit courts. This would utilize the telecommunications expertise of the MPSC and result in consistent rulings throughout the state. Finally, as with the Metro Act, we encourage this committee to add language to SB 637 to require the creation of a uniform application and uniform permits, so it would be the same process to access the public rights-of-way in Ann Arbor, Battle Creek, St. Joseph, Taylor, or any other municipality in Michigan. SB 637 is a good first step towards ensuring that distributed network providers have access to Michigan's public rights-of-way on a non-discriminatory and economically feasible basis. While Extenet supports SB 637, we also recognize that as written, it is just that, a first step. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Senator Shirkey?
I just have a question. Do we have a copy of your written testimony?
I do not have it available, but I can talk to someone.
Would you please make sure we get that?
Yeah, I'll give you my card, or the clerk will get with you, and we'll tell you where to send it. So we'll make it available for all senators. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. What we're going to do right now is there's one card that I found that wasn't read in the record, so I'm going to read it into the record. It's John Lamacchia, the Michigan Municipal League, opposes the bill, but is willing to work with us and the parties involved, and would like to maybe at a later date speak on the bill. And then with that, we have a couple senators have some other committees, so I want to get the other bill introduced. So we're going to stop taking testimony on this particular 637 Senate bill, and we'll come back to it. But we're going to go to our 637. We're going to go to Senate Bill 636. I'd ask Senator Zorn to, I think you're going to stay right there and present the bill. And the floor is yours, and we're going to Senate Bill 636 right now. Senator Zorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thank you for taking up Senate Bill 636, which promotes broadband expansion in all areas of the state, especially in rural and underserved and unserved communities. We all have heard from constituents requesting broadband expansion, but before construction even gets started, local governments can create red tape in the permitting process that has stopped broadband projects. To get broadband into our communities, government must get out of the way and work with the industry to provide the best in communications. Across the state, there is a patchwork of different permitting processes and cost of permits. Permit costs are currently all over the board, from zero to hundreds of dollars. There are 83 counties that provide their own policy. When crossing the county line, a different policy and cost may take effect that changes the total cost from county to county for each project. Senate Bill 636 will standardize the permitting process and provide continuity between counties. This problem illustrates the need to make changes in how road commissions are handling permits for broadband. This bill makes a few changes that will make the permitting for broadband services more efficient, less costly, and more consistent throughout the state. Some of the issues that are addressed in the bill include eliminating a cash bond requirement, capping permit fees per project, making sure road studies that are the responsibility of the road commission do not get passed on as a condition of obtaining a permit, and allows to obtain a yearly maintenance permit at a reasonable cost. To advance broadband coverage, it is essential to standardize policy and permit fees. It is not about the road commission revenue. It's about providing broadband to the underserved, the unserved areas of the state. Today, there's others from the industry that is here to testify. We'll provide more detailed information and share some of their experiences. I ask for your support of Senate Bill 636.
Thank you, Senator Zorn. Any questions? No? Thank you. Next, on this same bill, would ask Scott Stevenson, Telecommunications Association of Michigan, to please come up and say a few words. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Scott Stevenson with the Telecommunications Association of Michigan. We represent 40 broadband providers in the state, and most of those providers focus exclusively on providing broadband services in rural communities. And it's unfortunate, as I was listening, it's unfortunate that the electric co-ops aren't located in our company's service territories. They would have fiber access, where that fiber access can be justified based on the county fees. The bills before you today, both Senate Bill 636 and 637, address important issues that will help to speed up and fill in broadband where it isn't currently. And we believe these bills are complements to each other. As you heard, fiber optic connectivity is important for the 5G technology, and it is landline companies that will put in a lot of that fiber optic connectivity. So I'm going to talk specifically about Senate Bill 636. Senator Zorn gave a good explanation about the basics of what's in the bill. So what I'm going to do is just share some examples with you of how more and more county road commissions are making it unaffordable to provide or to invest in broadband in rural communities, and explain or show you where there are more and more communities that don't have broadband options specifically because of county road permit fees and requirements. The caps that are in Senate Bill 636 of $300 per permit and $1,000 per project already exist in law. Those caps apply when one local government works in another local government's right-of-way. And through all the time that we've been working on this bill and this issue, I've never heard any local governments complain that those caps are causing them any problems. So when they apply to their own work in a right-of-way, the caps are okay. Extending them to a broadband provider suddenly becomes controversial, and they oppose that idea. Senator Zorn talked about some of the things that are in the bill. It's important to note that this bill only applies to counties. The Metro Act covers cities, villages, and townships, and it only will apply to those counties that have put in place unreasonable or excessive permit fees and conditions. So the first example I'll give you comes out of Lenawee County. We had a company in Lenawee that wanted to build a fiber to the home network in the city of Adrian, and then in a neighborhood adjacent to the city, but still part of the same project. The company had no problem getting the permits it needed through the city because that's covered by the Metro Act. But when it went to the County Road Commission to get permit for that neighborhood, there was no way it could justify the expense that was going to be imposed on it, and so it just cut that neighborhood out of its project. And the only reason that neighborhood doesn't have the availability of those services there is because of the permit fees and conditions. In the same county, and this is this year, in the same county we had another company that is building a fiber to the home network that would reach about 700 potential customers. The county is requiring this company to pay $40,000 cash bond that won't be returned until 2019 at the earliest, $5,000 in permit fees, $6,000 in upfront inspection fees that could go higher, and this company is required to pay $60,000 for a road survey when they had anticipated that the county would know where its roads are. That adds up to about $158 per customer, and just in county fees alone that this company has to factor in to its investment decisions. In Ottawa County, a company applied for a permit, again, to build a fiber to the home network that would pass 1,400 homes. The company was required to pay $54,000 in permit fees. That amounts to 25 cents per linear foot, which is 5 times the amount that it would have had to pay in the city of Grand Haven because the city is covered by the Metro Act. They also had to conduct a road survey, and that cost them an additional $37,000. And then finally, in Genesee County, this was earlier this year, one of our companies was approached by a handful of farm owners in rural Genesee County, and these farm owners couldn't get broadband where they were, and they asked the company if it would be willing to provide them this service. The company went back and looked at it and said, yes, I think we can make this work. And this is outside of this company's traditional service area. They were going to extend into a neighboring area just to make sure that these folks had broadband availability. Then the company went to the County Road Commission, and they were shocked at what they would have to agree to in the county permits. And I'll just run through these quickly for you. The company would have to agree to pay upfront costs that included per foot fees, 32 cents per linear foot, which is more than 6 times what's capped in the Metro Act. And again, you've got rural areas. If you have to make a decision between where you invest between a city that is capped under the Metro Act and a county that is not, you're pushing investments away from rural communities. The company would have to agree to bonding and insurance requirements that are at least double what's in the Metro Act. They would be required to get a new permit every time the company needed to do maintenance work on their network, including presumably if there was an emergency and they needed to restore service, they would still be required to get a permit. They had to agree to pay for inspections at any time after the project was complete. So it could be 3 days after, 2 days, a year after. They would have to pay for these, even if they've done no work on those facilities. They had to put a cash bond up that could be held up indefinitely by the commission. The permit said that it's at the sole discretion of the commission when to return that cash bond. And then, despite hearing in testimony in other forums that these county road commissions are simply trying to recover their costs, and if a company doesn't agree with what it's being charged, it can challenge those costs. In Genesee County, this company would have had to waive its rights to question the fees at all. It would have to agree to let the commission change the permit requirements at any time for any reason without consultation, and it would have to agree to indemnify the commission for expenses caused by the commission's actions, not by the company's actions. So the company went to the road commission and said, can we negotiate this to a permit that fits this project and allows these consumers to get broadband? And the commission said, no, we don't negotiate. But I tell you what, you just sign the permit the way it is, and we promise we won't impose all those bad things on you. So the company obviously didn't sign that permit, and it scrapped that project. And to my knowledge, those customers still are without broadband service. And so we believe Senate Bill 636 only impacts the counties like those I've mentioned, which we're seeing more and more of this every year. If they have very high permit fees or expensive requirements. And in rural communities in particular, these barriers matter. It doesn't have to be a massive fee to make the difference in whether a rural broadband project can earn a return on investment or not. Large companies may be able to absorb tens of thousands of dollars in fees, but as I've said, in rural broadband situations, those fees will kill projects, or they will increase prices and make broadband unaffordable for certain consumers. So that's why we support these bills. We want to give everyone what they say they want, which is more broadband, but by establishing reasonable statewide caps on counties, you enable that to happen everywhere in the state. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you, Scott. Thanks. Appreciate it. Next, Bob Stewart, Frontier Communications, supports the bill and wishes to speak. You're welcome. Well, you're from out of state. We're trying to get these people from long distances up first. No, you're not that far. All right, thanks.
My name is Bob Stewart. I'm with Frontier Communications. I apologize for my voice. I've been very ill the last couple weeks. We support Senate Bill 636. There's 3 documents in the presentation I gave you. I'll be working off the PowerPoint, and then I'll give you an example of a permit supporting 4G technology with my wireless partners in the room. As most of you know, we've been having this discussion for several years, and so I'm not going to go over all the facts. I'm going to touch on 3 issues today. I'm going to introduce you to Frontier. I'm going to talk about the rural broadband expansion plans we have in the state, and then I'm going to give you some examples of right-of-way fees and structures and an actual permit example in the state. Frontier operates in 29 states, including most of our neighbors in the Midwest. My workforce is 100% U.S.-based. Michigan is the 11th largest state of the 29 states I operate in. I just completed a $10 billion acquisition of California, Texas, and Florida from my Verizon partners, and that knocked us down from number 8 to number 11. We have approximately 400 employees in the state. About 90 of them are veterans and military experienced. We have a very aggressive military hiring plan. They meet our needs very well. Several of them were communication officers in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they were reproducing telecom networks every other day when they were destroyed. I pass 1.2 million addresses in the state of Michigan in terms of potentials for service. At one point in time, before deregulation and I was a monopoly, I actually had 1.2 million customers. I have a scant percentage of that today after technology changes. I serve 42% of the land mass of the lower peninsula of Michigan. I have over 25,000 route miles of fiber and cable throughout this state. Route miles is very important because usually I really have about 40,000 miles of cable because I have both copper and fiber in the same route. So I've almost duplicated my entire copper network with fiber, about 60% built out at this time. I only occupy about 350 miles in the federal right-of-way, about 1,500 miles in MDOT right-of-way, and about 5,200 miles in private easement or railroad. My company was built over the period of about 100 years of acquisition of about 70 rural telephone companies in Michigan. Most of those companies were started by farmer co-ops, just as electric co-ops are done. And you can imagine most agricultural people at the time these facilities were placed and these structures were placed didn't want the telephone poles or the conduit in their fields. So that's why, for me, the vast majority of my exposure to this issue is in the local road commission public right-of-way. As far as I could tell by looking at road commissions, the largest road commissions in this state have less than a couple thousand miles of road under which they have administrative purview. I operate in 46 counties across the state, so I cover a little over half the counties. If you flip the page, broadband expansion in Michigan, currently we're under a program called the Connect America Fund. We received just short of $22 million a year from the federal government for the next 6 years to expand to roughly 68,000 addresses, physical locations in the state. Those tax dollars that were collected from all the consumers in Michigan for the last 40 years under the Federal Universal Service Fund, this is the first time since 1988 that Frontier and my predecessor companies have brought any of those federal tax dollars back to Michigan. So for us, this is huge because never did we get money for universal service in rural Michigan since 1988. We have to meet certain criteria. We have to deploy. It has to be so fast and all that kind of stuff. If you flip the page, you'll see a picture of Michigan that looks like that. That is my current third quarter status. All of those dots you see on there in your districts are new electrical equipment and fiber optic placements that are going on. I have a total of 3,000 projects over the next 4 years. I've completed just short of 700 of them. I'm in the construction business. I'm in your right-of-ways. I'm building every day. In terms of numbers, if you flip the page again, I have deployed 21,000 households under the CAF2 program as of today. But what's really important is as I pass everyone's household, and Verizon actually mentioned this, congestion is a huge issue. I have talked to many of you about slow broadband speeds from my company in your district. So there's another 22,000 households where when we built the fiber to serve our CAF2 exchanges, we groomed all the existing customers onto the new fiber superhighway. So the non-funded extra benefit is that everyone benefits by deployment of these assets, not just new customers in certain households. I am roughly 78% complete with my build for this year. If I don't make my 40% bogey by the end of the year and deploy another 22,000 households, I will lose my $22 million of funding on a go-forward basis for the state of Michigan. You can understand it's now November. I've got another 12,000 households to complete construction on by December 31st. The cost of infrastructure for right-of-way. I'm a finance guy by training, and most of you know me as an accountant. This is what I spend in the state of Michigan. I spend $4.8 million on right-of-way fees under the Metro Act annually. Approximately $3 million of that money goes to townships, which are pretty much supported by road commissions. In terms of county fees for permits, I spent $368,000 in 2016. I spent a lot more on that this year. Facility, when I'm asked to move my facilities in the right-of-way, I spent $2.6 million. When people ask me for bonds, performance bonds, just so most of you know, the face value of that performance bond, I spend 1%. So if you want a $1,000 bond, it costs me $10. So that's, standard pricing. I have been requested to pay $540,000 in cash bonds from road commissions. I have not paid any of those bonds. I have abandoned or delayed those projects. They are moved out. I participate in underground plant protection, which this forum passed a few years ago. I spend $1.2 million on facility flags in the ground and working with the 811 Center and Bruce Campbell, who's the director of that center. So roughly, annually, I'm spending just short of $10 million for the right to be in the right-of-way. If you flip the page, now I'm going to talk about road commission fees. Annual maintenance fees are a very interesting animal. I don't know what they include. When I go from county to county, they may include right-of-way maintenance. They may include tree trimming. Many counties waive road moves permit fees when they ask me to move my stuff. Sometimes it includes service connections, where I'm taking a right angle out of the right-of-way to drop the service connection into your home or business. Sometimes they cover repairs when my technicians are in the right-of-way. Sometimes they don't. Under permit fees, which is the event when I ask for construction, some places I have no fees. Some places I have flat fees. Some places I have per service connection fees of $125 to put 4 little wires into your house. I don't charge my customers for installation. Survey fees, I've paid thousands of dollars in survey fees. I no longer provide service to customers where I am required to give a survey fee by the road commission. I tell the customer they got to pay it, they got to get it. All of those are hindrances to broadband. Senate Bill 636 stabilizes the problem of road commission fees. It does not cure what I call the double fee issue between the Metro Act and the Road Commission. Like I said, I pay $3 million already to be in the right-of-way annually to be with the township. We support the bill. What if this bill's not implemented? It's, I think, a very good question. I have already abandoned over 5,000 households of CAF 2 bills in the state due to permit fees. I have moved the money to other places. I have one build in Lapeer County right now for Almont Township, where I've already invested nearly $600,000. The fees for the half a mile in the township I have to go were over $10,000. I suspended all further construction in Almont, Michigan. They're not getting broadband from me. That's my reality on a daily basis. So the abandonment, reprioritization, or delay of build-out projects is already happening in my business. I have to make capital allocation decisions every day. If you look at the 2 documents that were attached, one of them is a spreadsheet that gives you the URLs and annual maintenance rates and what the permit fees on every published road commission in this state. 28 of them do not publish their fee schedules on their websites. 57 do. The average across the state is $205 for an annual maintenance fee. What you see here is a permit. This is a permit to support Verizon Wireless and AT&T and other providers to roll out 4G in Kalkaska, Michigan. For those of you that go down M72 out of Grayling, heading out to Kalkaska, one of the only big hills in Kalkaska, you'll see a cell tower sitting on top of it. When they rolled out 4G in 2012, you will see that the permit cost was $30. I had existing copper facilities serving that cell tower. I put fiber in the same trench so that Verizon and AT&T could offer 4G. The cost of that was $7,300. It was the first 4G installation in Michigan in Kalkaska County in 2012. This is the reality of my cost to serve fiber to either macro cell sites or small cell sites. And you've heard testimony from my cellular partners in the industry that they need fiber to make this work. And these are my costs that I would end up passing on to my cellular folks when they ask me to construct these facilities for them. So this 636, I think someone made the statement, it complements 637. It absolutely does. I'm done, and I'll take any questions the committee may have.
Any questions? No? No. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Got another card it's, from Edna Iola, County Road Association, opposes the bill as introduced, does not wish to speak, and it says till next week maybe. We'll see you then. Wonder whenever we take it up again. All right, put that in the record. All right, and next we're going to go back to Senate Bill 637. I think that's all for 636. Anybody else on the bill we just been talking about want to approach the committee? Sir? What's your name? I have you right here on top. You were the very next one anyway, so come on up. That's perfect. So your name for the record says Free State Foundation out of Okemos, Michigan.
Yes, the Free State Foundation itself is actually based in Rockville, Maryland, but I'm based
okay.
in Okemos.
Okay.
So,
Welcome.
thank you very much. Yes, it's
Thank you.
Free State Foundation is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and education foundation, and it covers a lot of different things, but our main specialization is communications law and policy. I provided a written statement. I'm going to try to give an abbreviated version of it since it's a little late in the day, and you can see from there a little bit on my background. On Bill 636, I agree with what Senator Zorn said in introducing the bill. The goal should be to speed up broadband deployment so that more people can have it. And you know, the two previous speakers covered in a lot more detail than I could what the problem is. I think the only thing I'd really like to add on that one, other than echoing what they've said, is this is something the Federal Communications Commission in Washington is looking at too. That we hear about how the Federal Communications Commission is so divided. Well, by unanimous vote earlier this year, they started a notice of proposed rulemaking with the purpose to, quote, accelerate wireline broadband deployment by removing barriers to infrastructure investment, and is currently collecting information. The FCC is currently collecting information on what's going on at the state level. Now, that's all at the federal level. I think, out of federalism issues, I think it's better that the state be addressing it in advance. So I do commend the committee for taking that up and providing more certainty. That is an important step in making sure that wireline broadband deployment is sped up and available to more people. On the other bills, Senate Bill 636, the FCC is also looking at that. They have a separate notice of proposed rulemaking where they're collecting information on barriers to wireline deployment at the state and local level. So that's something being considered there as well. Again, I'd make the same point. I'm glad you're taking it up here. Senator Hume actually covered a lot of what I was going to cover in his very first statement. So I think the one point I'll just add is on economic impact of it. There are some projections out there that I'm not going to fully vouch for, but I think are very reasonable that wireline deployment should produce about $500 billion in economic growth, lead to about $275 billion in additional investment, and create about 3 million jobs during the process of the deployment over the next few years. Now, that's nationwide. Just doing a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation, Michigan accounts for about 3% of U.S. GDP. So if we multiply those by 3%, that's about $15 billion in economic impact in Michigan and 90,000 more jobs. If these projections are even halfway right, you can see how important this is. And, economic benefits delayed are economic benefits lost. So, again, I commend the committee for taking them up. Senator Shirkey asked earlier about what other states are doing, and yes, there are about 20 states that are looking at this, as well as the FCC. The bill I was most familiar with before the Michigan bill was the one in Arizona, which passed and was enacted just a couple of months ago. And I didn't go through carefully line by line or anything approaching that, but it looks like Bill 637 is very similar to what Arizona did and has, in fact, passed now. Other states are looking at them. The details vary from state to state on what they're doing, and I'm not really going into the details on it, but what they do have in common, as other states are looking at it, is that they're looking for providing access to municipal properties, reasonable costs and fees, and streamlined permitting. And I believe these bills on both the wireline and the wireless front do both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? No? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We had a couple of the cards that were just turned in. We're going to read them into the record, and then we'll get to our next speaker. We have, looks like 3 speakers left. Mr. Clerk.
We have Dan Paninian from Michigan Chamber does not wish to speak and supports the bill. You have Matt Groen from the Michigan Cable Telecommunications Association does not wish to speak and supports the bill. You have John Lemicka from the Michigan Municipal League does not wish to speak and opposes the bill. Chris Jones, the Michigan Association of Counties, does not wish to speak and opposes the bill. Tom Fraser, the Michigan Townships Association, does not wish to speak and opposes the bill. And then Amy Cumbrake from Wayne County does not wish to speak and opposes the bill. And then again, Theodore Ted Bowman from the Free State Foundation does not wish to speak towards 636 and supports the bill.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kim Carey, citizen out of Dryden, Michigan. Opposes the bill and wishes to speak. Kim, are you here? No? Okay. We'll put that into the record. We got Brian, is it Carey? Is Brian here from Dryden? No? How about Jeanine Deal? Is Jeanine here? Jeanine. So she's representing the people of the state of Michigan. I think all of us in the room are doing that. Hopefully. But you're from Battle Creek, Michigan. On Capitol Avenue, which is really close to my house. Oh, nice to have you come up here.
Well,
nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming up today.
This is my first
Someone
day.
from the great 19th Senate District. You have more than an ample opportunity to let us know what you think about this bill.
I will.
Go ahead.
Indeed, guaranteed.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. This is my first time speaking to a Senate committee, so I'm excited to be here. My name is Jeanine Deal, and I live in Battle Creek. I'm a mom and a grandma, and I can 100% guarantee that wireless radiation is harmful because I get sick from it. With continuous exposure to non-ionizing microwave radio frequency radiation, my body's healing processes start to shut down. I experience severe insomnia, neurological and cognitive disturbances, difficulty healing and functioning. Even walking becomes a challenge with enough exposure, and the science supports my experience. This bill is harmful, and it will make more moms, grandmoms, and children sick from the increasing exposure to harmful wireless radiation. I am robustly opposed to Senate Bill 637, the wireless infrastructure bill. Recently, 180 doctors and scientists from 35 countries signed a formal appeal to the United Nations and the European Union demanding a moratorium on the rollout of the next generation of wireless, 5G technology, and the Internet of Things, because of peer-reviewed scientific evidence that non-ionizing microwave radio frequency radiation causes harm, and I gave a copy to you. It's been proven to increase cancer, neurological effects, immune system disorders, and cause reproductive harm. The ultra-intense form of wireless that Senate Bill 637 will pave the way for will pulse more and be more highly modulated, factors the 180 scientists believe make it more bioactive and harmful, factors that are not protected by the current FCC safety guidelines. And Senate Bill 637 would add to the tragic and growing public health crisis happening today. Our representatives are supposed to catch problems before they occur. We need you to represent us and protect the public's interest. It is paramount you vote against this bill. Industry has lied to us. These microwaves are potent and I guarantee harmful. Senate Bill 637 is similar in language to the wireless infrastructure bill that Governor Jerry Brown recently vetoed in California because the Californians were outraged. Over 200 cities in California formally opposed that bill. Senate Bill 637 would give away public property, taxpayer-supported rights of way to the already wealthy telecom industry. It violates our fundamental property rights and strips away our right to protect our own health and the health of our loved ones. It blatantly ignores thousands of scientific studies. Non-ionizing microwave radiofrequency radiation is not safe. No one has ever made that claim. Not the FCC, not the American Cancer Society, and not the World Health Organization. No one. And in fact, I am the evidence. It can cause harm, and I speak for thousands of people across the United States. Some I know personally and have actually spoken with. I've also submitted to you a letter from the Environmental Protection Agency questioning the Federal Communications Commission's radiofrequency radiation exposure guidelines and a study showing how the human skin acts as an antenna for these millimeter and submillimeter waves. Senate Bill 637 allows for wireless infrastructure that would support these waves. There are thousands of scientific studies that back up my experience. Electrosensitivity is real, also known as radiation poisoning. Senate Bill 637 would streamline the permitting process for these mini cell towers to be placed in public rights-of-way every 2 to 10 homes, perhaps, depending upon weather, topography, all kinds of things. Perhaps is as close as right outside your bedroom window, and you would have absolutely no recourse. Senate Bill 637 is a horrible bill. It gives consumers nothing while giving our public property away. Faster internet download speeds can be safely hardwired, or people have spoken about fiber optics. That will create jobs. Also repairing a hardwired copper infrastructure that is currently being allowed to fall into disrepair. California recently found that hardwired 911 calls were repeatedly more reliable than the wireless infrastructure during the fires there. If we value the health and the safety of the public, we will keep our hardwired internet infrastructure, or fiber optics, and make that stronger. Hardwiring does not expose us to unnecessary non-ionizing microwave radiofrequency radiation, which is known to make many people sick. Just because you're not allergic to pollen or peanut butter doesn't mean that others aren't. And that's the same with this radiation. Please vote against Senate Bill 637 so that it stops right here in this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Appreciate seeing you and meeting you.
Thank you for listening.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
I think that's my job. We have Ed, who wants to come up and approach and address from the County Road Association. So Ed, the floor is yours on Senate Bill 636 or 637, or both.
Or both, yeah. I just want the parties here to know, and you committee members to know, that if there are instances where things have happened, I'd be curious to know when they happened, first of all. And if they really did happen, then we need to investigate that. And I've not gotten an opportunity to do any investigating on these complaints or these issues that have come up. On a couple of them I do, but I think those road agencies would want to come in and speak to you directly on those case-by-case basis. The other thing I want you to know is that we at the association have been working hard with our membership to try to get a uniform permit process. And we are in that process of unifying our permits across the board, including what we call our CRA 100, which is for working in the right-of-way. And hopefully we'll also be making these fillable, internet fillable, so that anyone can come online and just fill out the permit and get it done that way. So we're in a real transition period right now of, as far as our permit process goes and as far as our permit fees go, we're also looking at those. excuse me, we're trying to standardize all of our permit fees so that most of the counties, 90% of the counties, will use a simple one-size-fits-all fee and avoid all this charging going across county lines. Now, with the exception of that is our urban areas, our more urban counties, which are more sophisticated, have a permit office, not just a permit guy who also happens to load salt on the trucks, et cetera, et cetera. So in those cases, we would want to distinguish or separate them from the standard. Maybe we can develop a standard for them as urban counties, but those are things that we're progressively moving toward. So we are looking at ourselves internally and what our costs are and how best we can serve the communities and the industries in order to simplify what we do and why we do it. Now, when it comes to installation or construction oversight, that's a hard apple to peel from the standpoint that an engineer doing the construction oversight or a foreman or a laborer doing construction oversight or installation oversight, their fee structures are all different. So it's going to change from individual to individual depending on who is actually doing the oversight. So it's hard to really nail that down. The other issue is that some of these large fees are because of the complexity of the project. If you're talking about a project in an urbanized area with curb, gutter, sidewalk, multiple utilities in the ground, we have to spend a little bit more time out there to ensure the public safety and to make sure that their contractor or the provider or their contractor are also safe. We're not here to penalize or penalize any industry. We're here to make sure that the motoring public first is safe. The employees, the contractors, those working in the right-of-way are safe. And the infrastructure that's under the ground or above the ground is safe. That's what we're being reimbursed for. We're not asking to make money. We're not trying to make money. I've spoken to one of the providers, and I will investigate some of the cases that he has personally and find out why and what happened in those cases. But by the same token, he understands that we're looking out for the safety of the public. And we cannot use our MTF, our transportation revenues, for non-transportation purposes. That's why we ask to be reimbursed. Now, there's no reason to not to talk about the reimbursement rate for any one of those topics or the security. And we're more than willing to talk about all of those issues. We're confident that we can come up with some sort of a resolution here. But by the same token, we have to remember that we're doing the public's work. We're out there for a private for-profit, coming into public rights of way, and we have to make sure that everybody's safe. And with that, I'll leave it at that, and hopefully I can bring some of my road commissioners in to answer some of the more detailed questions you may have. But again, I'm not an engineer, nor am I an operations person. So if you got technical questions, I would hold them for the engineers when they come in.
Any questions? Senator Hume?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ed, for being here. I have to state a bit of irony in that we were talking about making sure there's access to internet in rural areas, and your response, one of your responses was, well, we're going to put an online form that folks can fill out to get a permit. I just wanted to say some irony there. But my question is, permits, are they designed to simply cover your members' costs, or are they designed to provide additional revenue?
No, to reimburse themselves for their actual costs.
Okay.
That's what we're doing right now.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, as chairman, I find it very encouraging that you're willing to think about the citizens that we heard today. That's what bothers me about this testimony today. Those individuals are supposed to get service, but now because of some of the roadblocks that was in front of some of the companies to get that service to the individuals, that they're getting it to everyone else. But if you're 1 mile outside of a subdivision or other local unit of the government, you're stopped. And that the people in the neighborhood, in the one example, they're not going to get broadband for a long time until you get that resolved. So I appreciate you coming up here and stepping up and saying you want to work on those things, because that just can't happen in Michigan. That's horrible. It's ridiculous. Let's just be honest.
And I'm honest with you, Representative, Senator. We are supportive of broadband. We are supportive of small cells, but it has to be done in an accountable, responsible way, and not. And right now, we feel like we're being pinched. It seems like there's a rush to everyone get in the right of way between the broadband, the small cell, and the ADCs or ACDs, what are they called? I'm sorry. I can't think of the medium-sized towers, whatever their acronym is. But they're all trying to get in the right of way. And we have 33 feet. 33 feet on either side of the center line is not a lot of room when you think about a 12-foot lane, a 4-foot shoulder, and maybe a 6 to 12-foot ditch. That doesn't leave a lot of room for anybody to be in behind the ditch. The reason we put you behind the ditch is to avoid any relocation, unnecessary relocation. And if you're in front and we clean out our shoulders or clean out our ditches, sure as God made little green apples, we're going to touch your line. We're going to touch that fiber. Poles are different. Poles are different from the standpoint that they're a safety issue. We work hard to clear the right of way to make sure that when a car loses control, it doesn't hit any trees or any obstacles. But when you start putting poles back in the ground, it's a liability for us. We do not have governmental immunity when it comes to a defect in the roadway causing an accident and somebody slide off and drown in a ditch or hit a pole. We're still liable for that.
I appreciate that, but I do appreciate you coming forward and saying you're willing to work with the good senator and myself and any other senator here that'd like to address some issues they may have with you. So thanks for being available, and we'll make sure we sit down with you before we pass this bill out of committee.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Members.
Anyone else from the committee before we adjourn? Anybody else? Just tell you about next week. We're going to take up and probably try to pass out Senate Bill 400, the Next Gen 911 bill. And so if you're interested in that, please come on back. And it'll be the same time, same place. So seeing no other further business for the committee, and I thank the members for attending, this committee is adjourned.